So, it's a Saturday, I've got plenty to be doing, but I thought, let's start a new project on top of the rest. Sounds fun to me. In this video series, I'll be aiming to make a stealth game. In this particular video, we're going to focus on distractions, which is going to be the main core of our stealth game. Something like this. Okay, to start off with, I'm just going to create a games project that we'll be using for the rest of this series. I'm going to use the third person template for now. Just setting up my folder systems and a name for the project, then we're ready to go. I don't want any starter content because we can just import that later if need be. Now that we're in the editor, I can set up the folders for my project. You can create whatever type of folder structures you'd like. I'm just creating a My Contents folder, inside that a Blueprints folder for our programmed assets, and inside that a Base folder for the base level blueprints. Now I'm just creating a blueprint actor that's going to be our distraction object. I'm going to call this BP_distraction. Once I've opened the blueprint, I'm just going to create a cube. This is going to demonstrate the object. That'll be a water pump, radio, whatever you want later. For now, I'm just going to make it a cube. I'm then just going to place it in the scene so we can see it. Once we have that, we need a radius to be able to tell how far the sound is going to emit from the object, be it a sound or whatever other distraction it's going to cause. To do that, I'm going to create a spherical collision around our asset. Make sure you make it large enough to encapsulate our enemy or whoever you want to be distracted. Now, when the enemy's in this radius, it'll call a function to tell the enemy to be distracted and go over and check it out. So, to set up that distraction, we're going to need an enemy. So I'm going to create another blueprint actor and call this one BP_enemy. With that open, I'm just going to create another cube in the components tab. This is just going to be our enemy, but in the final case this will be the mesh of our enemy. From there I just quickly created a base material so then I can create material instances and just change the colour on the fly. I'm just going to use these different materials to show what state the enemy is in, if it is looking and has heard a distraction or if it's just genuinely on its path. For the case of visualization, I'm just going to create a green material for generally on its path and a red material once it's heard the distraction and is in that area. Then I assigned it to the enemy cube after accidentally assigning it to our distraction cube. Now with the enemy in the editor, I'm going to create a level sequence. We're going to use this to move the enemy for the patrolling path. However, this isn't the method we're going to use later on. We're just doing this for test purposes for now. In the level sequencer, I'm just going to add our BP_enemy and I'm going to add a transform track. We're going to use this to be able to keyframe the movements for the enemy. Then I just copied our original keyframe and pasted it at the end of the track. Now if we select the level sequencer icon in the viewport and in the details panel under loop, we select loop indefinitely. Now the enemy should loop backwards and forwards. Here I'm just checking to make sure my collision's set up correctly so we know that it can detect if it's in the zone or not. From there we'll want to start programming the influence radius. So in the event graph you want to create an event actor begin overlap, and now we want to check which object it's overlapping. So you want to cast a blueprint_distraction master. Now we have that code set up in the enemy, I'm just going to print string after it casts, just to make sure it's casting correctly. Now when you run the game, when the enemy is in the detection bounds area, it will print a string. So now we know it's working. Now we know it can hear it and it is detecting it, we want to do something cool when it detects it. So for this example, I'm going to change the enemy's colour. Of course in the final game, this is where we'd call a function where the enemy goes and detects what's going on and checks it out. To change the colour, I'm just using a set material node and I'm using the cube itself as a reference point so it knows to change the material of that object. Now if done correctly, it should change colour once in the radius. Now the foundation is set up, we want to be able to manually activate this in game. To do that, I'm going to open up the distraction object and I'm going to create another collision. This is going to be a smaller bounds area, and this is the area that the player has to be in to be able to click the button to change the state of the object. Next, I'm just heading over to the third person character. From there I'm going to create a onActorBegin overlap node, and we're going to cast it to the bp_distraction object. That way we can tell if it's overlapping with that object. So I know we set up the other collision, however for now I'm not going to care about that. I'm just going to see if we're in any of the areas just for demonstration purposes. So after that we're going to go to the isDistracting and we're going to check if that's true. So we're going to get that variable and then use a branch to see if it's true. If it's true, we want to set distraction to false. If it's false, we want to set distraction to true. That way we're changing the state of if it's distracting or not. So far the state is going to change if you just walk in the bounds. We don't want that. We want to be able to turn it off and on by using a key press. So we're going to set that up now. To do that, I'm just going to call the function when the F key is pressed, and then on overlap I'm going to create a variable for entering and exiting the area, and this variable is going to check if you're in the distraction area or not. Now when we press the F key we want to check if we're in the distraction area or not. To do that I'm just using a branch, and then if it's true we want to call the function. If it's not, we don't want to call the function because you're not next to that object. Here on event tick I'm just printing the variable just to make sure that it's changing how we want it to. Now if I go in the bounds and press F, it changes from false to true, and if I press F again it changes to false, and if I go out of the bounds and press F it won't affect it at all. Now that's set up, we want to make sure that it interacts correctly with the enemy detecting. To do that, before we change the material or whatever function we're going to have later on when the enemy has heard the sound, we want to add a branch, and this branch is just going to check is distraction true. In other words, is the distraction sound playing? If it is, we want to set the material or do our function that we're going to set up later. If not, then nothing changes. It's not going to get distracted even though it's in the area. Now when we enter the area and press F and turn it on, the enemy colour should change. Unfortunately it doesn't yet because it's only checking it whenever the enemy enters the bounds. We want to check it when the distraction starts. To fix this for now, I'm just going to create a new variable called isOverlapping to check if the enemy is overlapping the bounds. So on actor_begin overlap we're going to set it to true, and then when actor ends overlap we're going to set it to false. From there I'm just going to create an event tick. When isOverlapping is true, then we're going to continue the function of the enemy changing state, in this case just changing the material. Now when we exit the bounds and isOverlapping is false, I'm just going to set the material back to green, so it's not longer in a detection state. Now when we compile and save and play the game, it should work how it should do. So that is the basis of the distraction mechanic. We'll be working on this further in further videos, and I'll show you examples of how to do things more efficiently. But until then, please like this video, consider subscribing, it's free, ring the notification bell so you get notified of the next video, and I'll see you in the next one.